for you, and then just a bit of background. Welcome everybody to Embodied Impact, where one of our sorry, I've got this.
Right. Keep going, Massimo. I think it's been Dominic's microphone. Okay, Massimo, I think you're on mute still.
Okay. Oh, Maz is still on mute.
Okay, Massimo, do you want to try this again?
I think maybe it's still.
So I think Dom, your microphone is there something a bit dodgy. Do you have headphones, man?
No, I'm actually on Wi-Fi and I'm just using the Apple. I've got no headphones or anything. I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
Yeah, I think like as soon as you're unmuted, there is some sort of like feedback.
Is that working?
I can hear you now. It's strange. My one is.
Maybe Dominic, could you disconnect once more and just reconnect? Maybe there's something with like your microphone settings that has been weird coming on the first time.
Is that working?
I think so. You know what? I'll log in from Safari and see if that helps, because I'm on Chrome now. We'll see if that does any difference.
That's good.
Can you hear my mic? Is that all right?
Yeah, your mic is great.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, beautiful humans. It's gonna happen in a sec. Dominic is gonna come back with a different browser. Let's see if the technology does the trick. So while Dominic is signing back in, so just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions, like once the conversation with Dominic starts, you can put them here on the side in the chat, where some of you already say like, "Oh, we can't hear you. You're on mute." And there's also like a question function. So if you want to put them in there, and then you can vote for questions to be answered more than others. And yeah, also if you want to join the Embodied Impact community, there's a button here in the bottom, and to join the space where you'll be around other humans that explore the themes of sexuality and money in all its shapes and forms from a conscious perspective.
And also very important, from that link, we will be sending you information about our men's groups that we're running, the retreats that are up and coming, and any workshops that we've got in the pipeline.
Indeed. Massimo, maybe do you want to share a little bit how you met Dominic? So as an introduction for people to get a bit of a feel of who this man is.
It seems.
It's also really weird because when we spoke with Dom just before going live, it worked perfectly fine.
You might have two windows open. That might be the issue. If there's two windows open, then it'll conflict. Well, I'm smiling because we have an interesting story how I became friends with Dominic. My sister came to visit me in London when I was training to do my doctorate, and we were out one evening with a couple of friends, and very loosely he approached my sister asking to buy her a drink, and my sister was engaged at the time, and she looked at him and said to him, Dom, what do you do? And he gave his explanation in terms of his expertise and background and things like that. And she looked at him and said to him, so you're a therapist like my brother. Yeah, you can have my brother. And from that moment, we became friends. And literally the friendship has been easily over 15 years now that we've known each other.
I love that. Yeah, so when we were speaking with Dominic just in the green room before coming on, he was very excited to be sharing a couple new insights he has around linguistics and neuroscience, and why it takes so long for people to change. So we're hoping that he will be back in a sec to actually enlighten us with all this. Did you send Dominic a message, Massimo?
Yeah, I'm sure he's trying his best.
Also, fast, I see in the question box, you said, I'm curious on your MBTIs. Curious to hear, what MBTI is, and then maybe we can explain this.
Same thing.
Okay, cool. Dominic is coming back. So let's see. Myers-Briggs personality. It's been ages fast since I've done this. It was I think in 2015 in Norway. So I can look it up and let you know privately at some point. I don't know it from the top of my head anymore. Dominic, say something.
Here at last. Okay.
Boom. Nice.
So let's get back into it. I was just telling Toby, because he asked me the question how we met, and we have an interesting story, and we became friends and work colleagues, and an amazing nearly 17 years now. I think.
It's been a while, absolutely.
Yeah. So a warm welcome again to everybody to Embodied Impact, where one of our primary focuses is around exploring the relationship between sexuality and abundance. Our ethos is centered on how we show up more presently in our sexuality so we can be more available in the world to contribute mindfully and from a position of abundance. I've always found these interviews quite interesting because either one of myself or Toby either have known someone for quite a while or we've been researching them for quite a while. But it's very rare to come across a gem that we've known each other for such a long period of time. And time for me is such a beautiful process, because when we have the opportunity of getting to know someone over a lifetime, we truly get to see their evolution. And this is the case for Dominic. I've been privy to Dominic's work over the years, from sharing an office space together, the countless digesting of patients that we've worked with to try and find the best solution for them it's always been immense. And not only being one of my best friends, he's just an incredible human being. And for me, it's wonderful to see him become so expansive in his life. But the most important part is seeing him touch the lives of so many people. Just this morning, once again, he was sharing some of his successes with his clients with me. And our topic today is about accessing the power of your mind. So who better to have with us today than one of London's most renowned Harley Street-based NLP master practitioners, having worked with clients ranging from teens to presidents, enabling them to unlock really their true potential, and author of Endgamers, Architects of Destiny. Dom, when's that due to be released?
It's going to be autumn this year.
Nice. And just diving right in, I'd love to know from you a little bit more about your background and how you got into NLP, hypnotherapy, and what drew you to literally being the master of the mind.
Well, I mean, I had a lot of things I was dealing with growing up, and in my early 20s as well. So I started to devour a lot of different books on personal development, self-development, psychology, as well as even a lot of different religious texts. It's quite a broad amount of reading and research and programs I went into. And before I got into this field, I was working for, at the time, it was the second largest business-to-business publisher in the world. And business-to-business publishing, we were not allowed to pitch to sales directors or marketing managers. We were only allowed to pitch to the founder or the CEO. So as you can imagine, in order to strike a deal, it would take several months, and you would have to really, really hone in and understand communication at the highest level. So during that period of time, I was learning a lot about the linguistics and conversational skills and persuasion. And I feel that while I was doing that, as well as the background with learning about personal development, psychology, I kind of melded them all together. And when I started to approach it, and when I started to work with individuals, I wasn't constrained to a particular framework or a knowing of what was possible and what was not possible. So I would approach each case with the understanding that their problem fundamentally is curable. Now, that may be something which sounds quite controversial. It's not something that I would explicitly verbalize, but I came from the perspective that if there's a problem, inherent within the problem is a solution. If we look at the world of physics, look at the world of science, you can't have a positive without a negative. You can't have a problem without a solution. And you cannot name any single disorder psychologically or physically that not has had a remission, or someone who has not overcome it. That's why I think fundamentally, again, it's my view, it's wrong to say that something cannot be solved. It just is incorrect. I actually think it's incorrect science as well to say that. So following along from that, we don't learn from words alone. We learn from osmosis. We evoke feelings in others. So if I'm working with someone with a framework of that person has a long time to resolve this, or they cannot be solved, or X, Y, and Z, that person's already scared. So then you have a back and forth that potentially can never be resolved. If you go in with the understanding of, well, that person has an issue to resolve, you know, it may take time, it may take no time. The time is irrelevant, but it can. Then you're going to be able to make some strides. Now, There's something I had mentioned to both of you before we went live, and it's a really pretty profound point. In the latest research in the world of linguistics, if I debate against you, let's say I'm debating against a Black Lives Matter or gender issue or right versus left, it doesn't matter what it is. Whatever my stance may be, or even we could say COVID. We could say COVID is real, COVID isn't real. Vaccination, no vaccination. If I argue against your stance, it reinforces it in your mind at a biological level. In essence, I am causing you to hold even more stringently to your view, no matter what that is. So you can't debate against someone's view. Now, here's the other thing which I'm going to touch upon. One moment. This was because I just was making notes on this earlier. Okay, here's the other thing. If you're doing something that you really enjoy and something that you believe in, and suddenly I enforce my rules on you to ensure that you keep doing that, do you know what will happen? You'll regress. You could love it as much as you might do it all day long. Maybe it's a video game, it might be a martial art, whatever it is. If I suddenly force you to do that thing, you're not going to improve. You're going to start regressing. So therefore, the key to personal change and eliciting that change in another is twofold. It's not to debate against their stance or what they're doing. In fact, it's to agree with what they're doing because they have a reason behind it. Then the next phase of it would be to find a framework where they can do something that they want to do in order to elicit the change. Now, let me give you an example. When I was working with anorexics, for example, and they would say to me they're terrified about being fat, I would actually agree with them 100%. And I would even go as far as to say, well, actually, I think everyone should be afraid of being fat. Completely agree. And I hold by that because that's really healthy. But what I don't agree upon is taking it to a level or an extreme level where one is sick. Makes no sense. So that's the approach I would take, is I would agree with what they're saying, but I would find other avenues that they would be prepared to approach in order to create the necessary change.
Do you think in that process, when you met with that defensiveness, that you gave time to actually break down the defensiveness, or actually, how would you deal with someone who's very, very defensive?
Well, I mean, I would listen to what they're saying and I would agree to it because they're presenting something that's true. It's true to them. What I would do then at that once I've established rapport and I demonstrate an understanding in their world, I'll give an example. Let's go to the example of the anorexia once again. I would say to them, if I gave you £1 million that was justly earned, or £1 million where I had just robbed a bunch of people, went to war over it, shot a whole bunch of people, so you have £1 million which is justly earned and one which is through war, what would you choose? And of course, I say, oh, the one that was justly earned. They're not going to say, well, it's the same thing. Why not be thin? Why not look great? Why not feel incredible? You can do that, but you can find another avenue of achieving that. And that literally holds true for everything. If you reduce a person's problems down, it just comes to they're afraid of something. And that thing they're afraid of is imaginary. It's not real.
So when someone's listening to our conversation today, and they're sort of sitting with themselves, how would you guide them to get to that place of fear and sort of out-condition that?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's to acknowledge and recognize and interpret what that is. Because here's the thing, it's not about eliminating fear. It's not about eliminating anger or jealousy or X, Y, and Z, because they all serve a purpose. Like, for example, if something really unjust occurred, well, you should be angry, right? But if you're angry about every single thing, every single day, well, there's an exaggeration in that. Do you see? So it's not dismissing what the person is experiencing, but rather it's showing them that that feeling is contextual. It has a time and place, but is not to be exaggerated or reinforced. So that's what I would do, is when they have a fear, well, what is it that you're specifically afraid of? Because people say things like, well, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm obsessive. But look, all these things are just, what is that? It's all ambiguous. If you strip it down to, well, you're afraid of a particular consequence, and you're able to deal with it more effectively.
I think what was interesting, what you highlighted, Dom, is that you can't argue for or against something, because as soon as you kind of like argue and speak about it, you give it more energy.
Exactly,
And
you're giving it more.
It reminds me of the work by like Vadim Sealand, where he talks about these like pendulums and like reality transurfing. Is that something that you've kind of like
I've heard of it.
Well?
I haven't delved in that. I can't really speak on that approach of reality transurfing, because I don't really know enough about it. But in terms of laws of assumption, esoteric mysticism, law of attraction, all those type of things, I've spent quite a lot of time understanding how that world works. And the other thing is, our assumptions of another, they tend to affect how that person will behave. So if I have the assumption that that person can get through something, they can do really well, even without verbalizing it, you'll find it will have an effect on the person.
Which I think is really interesting, because it highlights the responsibility that all of us carry in seeing the highest potential in the people that we engage with.
Well, I agree with that, because here's the thing. When we see the potential in others, it starts reflecting back on us. And the reality is that potential is true. Like, we can't, if biology is linked to belief is linked to biology. So if you're convinced that you're unable to do something, it kind of like works as a no placebo. It's the opposite effect. You're constricting and you're capping your potential if you think you can't do something. But if you explore that area long enough, if you invest enough time into something and it feels right for you, you can do something exceptional. And I think that's a better framework to move forward with, as opposed to attempting to limit or constrict potential. We don't know what our potential is, so why not completely embrace things? And we may really surprise ourselves.
Tom, have you got an example of one of the clients that you're working with where that sort of plays out?
In terms of fear and phobias, well, I mean, I'll give you a classic example, which is like very common, like, one who is afraid of the fear of flying. So, for example, what they are doing is they're not on an airplane flying across the Atlantic and then, oh my God, I'm supposed to be afraid, and they freak out. They're working themselves up months beforehand, even a year beforehand. They're imagining something that hasn't occurred. They're reinforcing the fear. They're anticipating it. They're trying to hold themselves back. Then they're attempting to fight through it. But what are they doing? They're scaring the hell out of themselves over something that isn't true. They're not even on the airplane. So what happens with fear, it's not so much the fear in the moment. They're scaring themselves beforehand. So when you make the unconscious conscious, as in you elaborate and you show them specifically what they're doing, suddenly you've got a handle on that. When you have a handle on that, you can start changing that. It also shows us how the richness of our imagination produces these outcomes. So if we change how we think and how we communicate, we're suddenly in a position where we have new choices and new options, as opposed to past reference points. Because if you use a past reference point and then you reinforce a future fear, you're getting nowhere. If you take yourself in a position where you can relinquish the past, have present moment awareness and anticipation of a better future event, then suddenly you're in a place where you can start creating the change you're after.
This happens a lot with the OCD clients that I work with. I mean, and you also work with a lot of anxiety-based disorders. It's just this absolute repetition and being in their mind constantly, and like you say, the event hasn't even presented itself, but yet they're so actively involved in creating this on an imaginary level, and then eventually try and sort of find these things in real life to actually piece it together to make it manifest, almost feel as though it's manifest.
Yeah, I mean, they're reinforcing the fear. And here's the other thing to understand with stuff like obsessions, OCD. If someone says to me they have OCD, I say, well, that's amazing. We all do. It's nothing to be really proud of. We all have an obsessive part of the brain. So it's about channeling that in the right way. Do you see? So you as long as you channel that thing in the right area, then it can be very productive. So what they'll say, well, I'm afraid suddenly if I get rid of this, I'll become something I don't know who I am, or X, Y, and Z. But you strip that away. No, you won't. You'll just be more responsible with your behavior and how you are to others. You have more future potential. You don't get rid of traits or emotions, and you shouldn't, because they serve a purpose, but they're contextual.
If someone didn't have access to you or a therapist or anything like that, and they were really kind of working on themselves, what would be sort of a couple of the pointers that you could give them, or at least guidelines where they should start in actually confronting some of these things?
Well, again, it's always acknowledging what that thing is and working your way to a place of equilibrium. So you're in balance, you're poised. You're not either elated or depressed. You're balanced. And that's why one of the things I touched upon earlier when I said, like, if something bad happens, you should be angry, but you shouldn't be angry all the time. Do you see? It's all contextual. When they view that and they see that, then they have the potential to start changing it, because they're not dismissing the emotion, but they're recognizing that it's contextual. Then they'll say, well, my mind is saying X, Y, and Z to me. Well, look, you can't always trust your senses. The earth feels flat, it feels still, but you don't argue against it. Do you see? So it's just like, well, your mind is saying something. It is. But what it is the more you take your attention off something, the more it starts to wither away. So it loses its power, it loses its intensity. So if you start building a profound life, a wonderful life for yourself, you become more preoccupied with that, as opposed to focusing and trying to resolve something that doesn't even need to be resolved.
Yeah, I think it's important what you say with like taking the awareness of something and then it falls into the oblivion. But I think the challenge here, and maybe what I'd love for you to highlight, is like, how do you sort of make this transition from, taking your mind off, whatever, like media narratives or whatever people get fed basically, and becoming these self-empowered sovereign beings where it's like, look, what is it that I want to create? And how do I then invest my energy into that future outcome? Okay, then finding that balance between present and future.
Okay, look, first of all, we have a finite amount of thoughts per day. And this is why, let's say someone's dieting, right? And they do really great in the morning. Then come the evening, they start binging. Why? Because the willpower, the thoughts, everything, it diminishes by then, right? So we have a finite amount of thoughts. And we learn, and this is one of the things I was touched upon, we learn through osmosis. When the first Mars rover landed on Mars several decades ago, there was a sudden shot in the cells of Cadbury's Mars bars, and they had no idea why on earth they had this astronomical growth. They hadn't added anything to their marketing budget or anything. So they researched it, like what has happened. And then they discovered that because it was in everyone's periphery, from the radio stations to the news, so Mars, people walking into a sweet shop and buying a Mars bar without realizing it. Why? Because you're bombarding the periphery. When it comes to the news or negativity, one needs to detoxify completely. You literally pull the plug out of it. You'll be informed if there's something you need to be informed about. And if something is unjust, then do something about it, or don't watch it. Invest in a charity organization, do something actively. But if you bombard yourself with negativity, what will happen is it infuses in the system. doesn't do you any good. So what it does is it creates a reinforcement paradigm. That's why if someone's afraid of flying, you'll find that they have research documents on every single disaster ever. And they're wondering why they're afraid. Right? Yeah, so essentially, just like we detoxify from excess sugars or fast food or X, Y, Z, it has a time and place. Horror has a time and place, but don't engage in it all day long. It's not going to get you anywhere.
It's such an important point that, Dom. I think, to be honest, I think that's probably from you that I actually got that, where I stopped watching the news, because I mean, it's been easily 15 years that I haven't watched the news, or actually willingly put on the television to actually watch that kind of stimulus. And that's also formed part of when I sort of help people as well. It's like you say, really decompress the amount of that kind of stimulus. Otherwise, what are you doing all the time? You're just constantly trying to clear space for your own, I guess, even just being a little bit more conscious of yourself. And there's nothing really that you're creating if you're bombarded with everything.
Exactly. And it's triggering you. This is the thing. Like, it's evoking unpleasant emotions. Like the other day, I was watching some stuff on cryptocurrencies and this and that. And one of the guys on there, he was saying, look, this is a really great project, but we've got to, it's by some Chinese developers. If you're okay with it, go ahead with it. But, they are Chinese or they are Russian. That's racism. But they're being racist without even realizing it. So they're carrying a narrative against a group of people or a country. The country's composed of individuals. A lot of those people oppose what's going on. So, like, generalizing on a nation, and that's what you're getting from, I mean, the headlines were horrendous. I mean, I was reading these headlines say, well, Russians shoot children. Well, no, it's not a Russian who shot a child. It's a soldier of a particular tyrant who shot a child, and a lot of people completely against that. But what that does is you're flaming racism. It's just like, well, if you're reading into that all day long, what's happening? It's developing prejudice. You have your own hang-ups. And the mind and the body, they learn once again through osmosis. If you're watching too much negativity, it's eliciting these unpleasant emotions. And this is why detaching from that, be the very best you can, do something great in this world, help others. But you can't help others if you're in that headspace.
I mean, you've been touching on this whole osmosis thing like so many times now, and it's something that is really super, I think, present for me as well. Like, what are the environments, like physically? What are the human beings that I surround myself with? What is the information? Can you speak about this whole osmosis concept a bit more, like how you approach it?
Well, of course, it's because a really interesting thing is, like, we learn it's not even so much the words, it's the expression. Like, if you're really comfortable with yourself, others are comfortable with you. And this is kind of an osmosis thing. So I want to give two examples. I have a friend of mine, she wrote a really great book. I'm trying to think of the name. Some type of like unlimited power, Catherine Gajedi. And she's a mixed race woman who's worked for the royal family in England. She worked for the Saudi royals. She's been a TV presenter. She's a really, really incredible woman. And what it is, she said that no one's ever brought up anything to her about race because she doesn't even see race. Like, she has no hang up over who she is. And she was massively underqualified for the roles that she had with the Saudi royals, where she was working in terms of investing hundreds of millions in properties. But she's so comfortable with who she is, people comfortable with her. So we reflect that from one another. If we're very defensive, then people reflect the defensiveness. If we're completely accepting, people accept us. Years ago, when I first started the world of therapy, I went to work with an agoraphobic. Now, these people are terrified of leaving their homes. And I'm not sure, Maz, if I ever told you this story, but it's quite amusing, right? So I head out to work with this guy in his home. I didn't even have an office at that time. And I'm asking him what's up with him, what's happening. He was explaining to me it's been years, he can't even leave his own home. He's petrified that he's going to freak out, he's going to panic. And he has a family restaurant, which is literally 5 minutes walk that he hasn't been to for years. Like, his daughters run it, his family's run it. So I'm working with this guy, and I'm working on resolving his phobia and his fear. in the middle of the conversation, he starts to tell me about his life and his Armenian, and then he says to me about Turks, right? And he says to me that if only the concentration camps were built to use against the Turks instead of use against the Jews. Now, as he's saying that to me, he doesn't realize I have Turkish heritage, right? So I'm listening to what he's saying. I'm acknowledging him as a person, though I'm not agreeing with his points, and I'm not dismissing what he's saying. But I continue to work at resolving his phobia. At the end of the session, he says, I can do it. Let's go to my family restaurant. So we walk to his family restaurant. His daughters, his family bring out so much food. They look at me and they see a bit of this hand and they ask me, what's your ethnicity? and I say at that point, I say, well, my mother's from Cyprus, so I leave it ambiguous. Because Cyprus, well, you might be Greek, you might be Cypriot, you might be Turkish, you might be X, Y, and Z. This guy goes bright red, and so do his daughters. But I don't say anything from there, and I kind of alleviate the tension from what they're saying. I say, oh my God, I love Armenians, X, Y, and Z. They bring out loads of food. Now, here's the thing. I never said to them where I was from. Now, that probably had more of a profound effect on getting rid of his prejudice as opposed to me trying to debate against it or getting up and leaving or even being offended by it. Do you see? That was his reality. That was his life. So if you want to resolve conflict, it's not through fighting against a narrative or the point which I said earlier on. If you debate against something, it just reinforces a point of view. It's just accepting people as they are. And if you do that, you'll find they have more of a propensity to change than debating against a point of view. So again, I've gone down a particular tangent here, but this is osmosis. You're comfortable with yourself. You carry yourself a particular way. That's how you influence others. You influence your surroundings with beauty. You influence the surroundings, the acceptance of others with what you want to see in them, and you'll evoke that quality within them. That's what osmosis is. And what I'll do, I'll stop at that point now and let you guys elaborate on that a bit.
It's a very, very interesting sort of alignment with, I mean, coming from a psychotherapeutic background where you, I mean, I guess if you're Freudian or psychoanalytic in background, transference and countertransferential feelings, and if we're digging deeper, your resonance really is going to be impacting the people that you come in contact with. And it's such an important point to make, where really I think, well, what is the biggest thing that we need to be achieving for ourselves in this world? And that's stopping any internal emotional turmoil. The moment we get to that point, our resonance changes, and we're, like you say, you can deal with things with so much more clarity and so much more, I guess, less bias in that sense, that you're 100% present with whatever's happening in front of you.
Well, this is it. It is that present moment awareness, and not dismissing another's views or how they're behaving or how they're operating out of this world. It's like that Gandhi quote, like, be the change you wish to see in the world. When you're like that, then very readily you're able to develop a true rapport and connection with others. And people will tend to start adopting better behaviors. So it happens from within yourself. And onto the point, once again, of osmosis, our brains, they essentially synchronize, and this is how like mirror neurons work as well. So when you're comfortable in yourself, the other is comfortable with you, and then you're opening a window of possibility in order to create change. And on the same front, you're creating change within yourself. Now, because the mind doesn't distinguish between what's real and what's imagined, if you expect and believe the very best for yourself, with an almost knowing, it's not faith, it's absolute knowing. What happens is your behaviors start to change. Your biochemistry, your body begins to start to change. and your environment, you know, what you have around you begins to blossom and begins to evolve, because ultimately we're just looking to get to a place of equilibrium, happiness, self-improvement, helping others improve. But that's impossible without first improving oneself. It just cannot work. You can't force or contrive change with others or even within yourself.
So I mean, just listening to you speaking, my mind goes off to your kids, and you know, I think I know that they're a massive source of inspiration for you, and anyone who knows Dom he's an incredible dad as well. So that's really, I think, for me, always a testament of an amazing man, for that matter. I wonder if you could speak a bit about your son, because his journey is amazing, and you know, knowing how you've been there at every step of the way, sort of reinforcing this. I think that might be a good example of everything that you've spoken about today, how he's manifesting that. And
well, yeah, I mean, it's something I'm very proud of, you know, in terms of my son and what he's doing. And there's a couple of things which I'm going to touch upon here. Like, for example, when I used to go to the parents' evening, I remember when he first started secondary school, and you know, I went to parents' evening, and the teacher was saying to me, "Oh, he's very disruptive, and he's been drawing on tables, and we might expel him, and X, Y, and Z." And when I heard all of that, and you know, and I'm there, and I'm listening to some of the, you know, other parents, and the other parents are going off on one about their own children. It's just like when I saw my son, I said to him, "Oh my God, I used to scratch up the tables like anything," you know. It's yeah, so I didn't lie to him. I wasn't trying to force him to be something that I never was. Do you see? What am I going to ground him for? Like, biologically, if you think about the our ration doesn't fully form until our mid-20s anyway. That's why children are complete chaos. So I bought him a gaming chair, and I said to him, "Look, the teachers clearly can't keep up with you." And I said to him, "They can't keep up with you because your brain's working too quickly. You're probably a lot smarter than them anyway." So, I mean, I didn't lie to him. You know, they weren't able to hold his attention. He didn't scratch any of the tables at my house, in his home. And I scratched tables when I was a kid. So I aligned with what I was saying. I said, "Look, just focus a little bit more in what you're doing." So I kind of aligned with what was going on, but I didn't need to enforce hypocritical rules. Do you see? This is the other thing. And then what I found as well in terms of you know, development. So he started to do quite well at school. He was, you know, after that we got into a lot of areas of mental arithmetic. So when we went back to school the next year, they were saying to me, "Well, he's academically gifted, quite clearly, but he's not really that good in the world of sports." Eventually, he goes on to do his GCSEs and is in the 4th group, right? So that's not just like from the top, then you've got under the top, then you've got a bottom, very bottom, right? It was so embarrassed by that. So when I go to parenting, I said, "Look, he really wants to do something with sport, encourage him." It was the same narrative over and over again. "Well, you know, he's academically gifted, but he's not going to make it in sports." And I said to them all the time, "Look, he wants to do something in sports." Anyway, the last year of his GCSEs, I got him in the Hodger Gracie Academy. Now, Hodger Gracie, and this will touch on
sorry, the sound is a little bit. The Roger Gracie Academy.
Okay, Hodger Gracie Academy. Is that okay? Yeah. So Hodger Gracie's Academy, Hodger Gracie is a 10-time gold medalist. It's full of world champions. So this is osmosis. I have him train there. I even say to him, "Look, don't even bother going into class if you don't want to. Just wasting your time. Like, time is precious." A lot of parents, they won't be too happy with this approach, but I felt it's for his own good. Just forget about PE. So he starts spending a lot of time at his academy with all these world champions. Within a year, he takes European gold. When he had concluded at school, I emailed the school and I said to them, "Thank you so much for keeping him at the bottom group." He got so self-conscious about that, they invested all his time in doing something in the world of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, is now European gold medalist, and by then he had taken the GB gold as well. And I said, had it not been for your pessimism or for keeping him in the bottom group, it wouldn't have ignited this passion. So thank you for that. Anyway, they emailed me back and they said, look, we want to feature him in the school magazine. I delete the email. They're not going to take credit for that. What do they take credit for? So anyway, subsequently, he's got to the age of 20 now. He's got so much gold in his room, and is going to turn professional in that world, and is also earning a substantial income in the world of the crypto space and the NFT space. Now, here's the thing. I had fanned the flames of that, but I hadn't forced him to do that. Do you see? I had put him on a path of something that he was enjoying and that he wanted to do very well. And in fact, one of there's a two-time world champion that he's beaten twice consecutively as well. So very proud of that. My daughter as well, another success story. She turned 23 now, doing exceptionally well in terms of our online marketing businesses in the crypto space. But again, none of these things have been enforced. It's just directing them and putting them into environments where people are thriving, then success becomes inevitable.
That's hugely powerful.
That's the story of of osmosis, as opposed to enforcing stringent rules and regulations. Because if you go back to the first thing I touched upon, if you debate against someone's point of view or their difficulty, it enforces their position.
Yeah.
Right. Further to that, the moment you're attempting to create change by enforcing it, you're just reinforcing the paradigm. So that world doesn't really work as effectively as giving someone more of a free rein towards something, towards what they want to do, and then to lead them in that direction. It's a very indirect approach.
It's beautiful. It's so, I feel so just aligned. You know, you're
Aligned
ultimately, give space. And when there is space, then there is more of this present moment awareness already anyway. And if you're in an environment where everybody is succeeding and winning, then obviously you will become one of them.
That. It's going to rub off on you. You're part of that. You're in that energy. And we evoke feelings off of one another. So one of the things you're touching upon, which you said, the reality transfer, which once again I can't really comment on, but law of attraction, assumptions, all these things are based upon feeling. Feelings and emotions are what construct our world, not facts and figures. It's what we feel. So when we're amongst people who are succeeding, we're evoking emotions and resonance off of one another, and then we're constructing a reality which represents that. So this is why it's vitally important that we learn to manage our emotions as effectively as possible, and surround ourselves and be amongst people that are moving in a particular direction. And if others aren't, we become a symbol of possibility for them, and they can join the ride.
It's immensely powerful. I'm just mindful we're coming to a close, and I haven't spoken about your book. And
okay, also
that.
Relationships. We want to touch upon that, right? Relationships, masculinity, embodying who you are. There's a couple of points which I'd like to share with you both and with the listeners. You know, ultimately, it's about delivering to your partner what they desire, what they need, as opposed to what we think they want, or enforcing a particular paradigm. To touch upon this, like my late fiance, when we first met, and on our very first dinner, we were at the World's End Market. You remember it, right? World's End Market. Anyway, so we've got some at the time of the finest steaks in the world coming. So over our dinner date, you know, I'm hearing her say to me certain things, such as like her favorite food, the dishes that she loves, and I was taking these mental notes. While we were speaking, she was asking me about like my favorite food, And I said, you know, I absolutely love Black Pod. I didn't realize she was taking mental notes too. So, you know, we start seeing each other, we start dating, and then she surprised me by ordering all the ingredients from Japan. She learned how to make that Black Pod. So it's, and one of the things I mentioned in the book is she expected nothing from me, so I gave her everything. And it holds true vice versa. If we don't feel forced into doing something, then we want to do it. And this is why it's really important to be cognizant of the person that we're with, of their hopes, their aspirations, and their desires. And we become an avenue of being able to acknowledge that and deliver that to that person. In this famous book called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, and what he said, it was so profound, which was, you do things out of not of an act of duty, but you're doing it out of an act of love. That person needs that. So you do that for that person. And that way you have something that has a potential to flourish. You have the potential for an incredible and outstanding relationship. Look, here's the thing with us as human beings. We have a set of values, we have a set of things that allow us to feel love, that allow us to feel connections. So when we observe that in another and we're able to deliver that, and the thing with relationships get better with time, but what it is they will predictably plateau, but so does exercise, so does training, so does art, so does music, so does our own intellectual pursuits. They plateau. The only time they get a next spike of growth is if we work through them. So if we work through that, then we have the next spike of growth. And what happens with relationships in the world today is there's too many options. So people are bombarded with X, Y, and Z. So the moment there's an obstacle or difficulty, they've got an option, so they never work through it. But it's important to understand that people change, we all do. So we're in different relationships with the same person all the time. So acknowledge, love that, and build upon that.
It's a really, really, really powerful point, Tom.
And that's what I wanted to say in terms of the world of relationships. And what distinguishes the relationship from a partner to a friend is the physical aspect of it. It is sex, and it can't be winged. You're not just suddenly a great lover. One must learn how to manage their emotions, their state, their technique, how they make another feel. And that's why Maz has helped me understand this world inordinately and the importance of it. And there's no shame in that world, because people, they bring a lot of shame, anxiety, guilt, X, Y, and Z. And I hear this all day long, like from women, that they'll say to me things like, well, you know, suddenly when we're together, the guy's not that lover I wanted. And she won't even say that explicitly to that guy. The guy, for whatever reasons, he retracts that side of himself and he saves that for a lover or an X, Y, and Z. No, that side is for your primary partner. It's not for anyone else. They don't know that. And on the same front, there's no shame in that, in what a person wants to experience or wants to have. But you can have that all with your primary partner. You don't have to look elsewhere for that. And on the same front, one must learn the whole energy, sexuality, performance, and to become a great lover. It's not someone isn't born that way. It's learned.
Dom, what I'd love to do is, because we're needing to wrap this up in the next 2-3 minutes, but if we can maybe get together in the coming months again and actually going deeper into this relationship and sexuality space. I feel there's lots that you feel you'd like to bring forth.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's such a huge topic in itself. But the reality is desire. Sex, it's an act of creation. So you'll find that even the manifestations of our life's goals and desires, it's a pure energy, right? So it's about tapping into that and harnessing that and channeling that. But that's a very, very, it's a big topic in and of itself. But to touch upon the book, which will be releasing quite soon, Endgame as Architects of Destiny, I build a very strong case for success by biological design. The book as well is loaded with stories of game changers, both past and present. And I touch upon a really powerful conversation I had with Massimo within the book. And we learn as human beings, not through facts and figures, but it's scientifically proven now. We learn through fables, metaphors. We learn through stories, anecdotes. We don't learn through facts and figures. And this is why, if you look at the texts of the past religious texts, irrespective of the validity of any of them or the ability to prove X, Y, and Z, those stories can be proven by the change they elicit in others, right? So it's to be taken, a lot of that, the way one looks at art, learn, derive without purely literal understandings. There are a lot of things that are literal and there are a lot that are not. So it's not about confusing the two.
Like most of our conversations can go on for hours and hours and hours and hours. So I'm glad, Toby, put that across, and we will have you back again, because I think it's super important, and your wealth of experience is immense. We will put all the links in terms of finding you in the chat as well. Also afterwards, when it's published on YouTube, we'll have all the links there available too. Dom, thank you again for sharing the space with us, dude. It's always...
Thank you for having me, and thank you for everyone joining and supporting. I will also forward a link to the first chapter of the book. And does anyone have just a quick question or anything before we wrap up?
Have you got the link at hand, Dom?
For the book?
Yeah.
You know what? I could put up the first chapter now. Should I add it into the conversation?
We can.
Yeah,
we can...
we'll add it in as well.
Okay, perfect. And if there's any other questions,
I think if there's more questions, we'll direct them towards your space, Tom.
Okay, fantastic. So what I'll do, I'll get the chapter over there for you guys and share it with your audience.
We'll share it with everyone who's been here today.
Fantastic. And a good portion of the book will be going towards several charities. So, I can quite confidently encourage everyone to buy as many copies and as much support as possible. Massive amount will be hitting charities on mental health, a couple of women's charities, and a few others on sustainability as well.
Amazing, dude.
Real pleasure, guys.
Thank you so much. Lots of
love.
fun.
I'm going to put my image off now, and I will get the book out to you guys now, just the first chapter.
That's a lovely.
See you again soon.
Bye. Wonderful seeing you guys. Thank you for having me.
See you. Bye-bye.